half the things, but anyway. My name is Ann McGee, and I live at Big Lake. We moved here in 2008 from Lexington, and I grew up in Holdridge, so they're all kind of the same size town and same feel. I was a Spanish teacher for 42 years, and my secret desire was always to be a librarian. And I thought about it, and by the time I thought maybe I could go back to school and get a degree in library science, and then it was like, yeah, whatever. So I just went to the school library and helped out a lot, and that was such a thrill to me to check out the books and everything, and then I, which takes me back to the nostalgia. I gotta figure out how am I going here? On enter?
Space bar.
Space bar, oh, okay. Took me back to my childhood, where I grew up in Holdridge, Nebraska, and that was my library, at Carnegie Library. And I got to thinking about the Carnegie libraries, and this one was built in 1904. Yours here was built in 1916. So I think the year span was 1886 to 1917. So, but that project went across the country building libraries, and they built 1,681 libraries. And there is a site that was really interesting about the library. I think it was the Library Commission or the Carnegie Commission, one of those two, where you can go in and you can see how they're built and where they're built. And there were universities, there were big towns, there were little towns. So that was an amazing project. So I'm assuming that most of you, like me, grew up with a library close by, and you could just ride your bike or walk and get your books and go back home and read them in a day and want to go back. So it was really foreign to me to think that there are people in our country that didn't have libraries, that didn't have any access to books. And that's what I found out by reading this book. Whoops, just.
I wish that wasn't
Okay.
half like that.
Okay. Reset. Okay.
I don't know how to get that half.
Yeah. It's all right. Okay. Anyway, it's the book. How did we go back?
Back?
Yeah. We go back.
From here, I'm gonna go back this way.
Okay. The book Women of Troublesome Creek. And I don't even know how I came across it. It was evidently recommended, and then I found out it's New York bestseller. Lots of people are reading
It's on
it.
Kindle.
Yeah. It's
And I was going to add, when you were talking about libraries, I don't know if you know it, but the Carnegie Foundation just recently, every Carnegie library in the United States was given $10,000.
Yeah, I just
Wow.
read that.
Yeah.
And something about it they still have to have the original, building
I
or
don't know
something.
all the details.
Something. So
Yeah.
you definitely,
I can't
pass them to a qualified.
get the half
That's
for you.
fine.
I don't know how.
That's fine. So anyway, the book Women of Troublesome Creek is the name of the book I read, and it was about these Packhorse librarians in eastern Kentucky. The counties were so poor that they didn't have access to schools or libraries or anything. Their roads were untravelable, if that's a word. So that got me intrigued about this, and then I saw that she wrote a sequel called The Book Woman's Daughter, so I read that one. And I was talking to somebody about this book about the Packhorse librarians, and somebody said, well, there's another book called The Giver of Stars that's about Packhorse librarians. So I read that one, and this is an interesting side note. The fans of Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek were so, evidently The Giver of Stars came out a little later. They were so upset by The Giver of Stars, they thought she poached the information out of the Bookwoman book. And so there's talks of lawsuits and all kinds of stuff. And then Jojo Morris said, I didn't even know there was another book, so how could I have poached that information? So dust settled, everybody's happy, and there's 3 books about these that I knew of, 3 books about Packhorse Librarians. And then my granddaughter in last year was a senior at Elkhorn South and got one of the leads in a play, their fall play, and she's telling me about it, and she said, yeah, I'm playing a librarian who takes books on horses. And I said, what? I said, what's the name of it? She said, well, she didn't know. She just knew her character. She didn't care the name. So anyway, it turned out it was The Bookwomen. And this woman that had written the script obviously had read both or at least one of the books, because it just kind of followed along. Didn't include everything, but kind of the idea of the Packhorse Librarians. So so that was pretty phenomenal. So anyway, it was kind of like, okay, I think this should be fun to kind of search into this, do a program for PEO, and that's what I did. So this is written from Kim, who wrote the Bookwoman. Librarians are lifelines for so many, giving us powerful resources to help us become empowered. I love hitting the back roads to seek out small town libraries. These places are treasured cornerstones filled with social mores, hidden gems that offer an opulence of customs, inspiration, and warm hospitality. So the information that I've gathered came from Google, from the author's notes, from even the back of this program, and I put it all together. I have some pictures, and I'm shamelessly putting in some pictures from my granddaughter's play, because some of them fit right in. And their drama department had 0 budget, so they had to be very creative with their props, but just a side note. The Packhorse Library Project was established in 1935 and ran until 1943. The service was part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration and an effort to create jobs for women and bring books and reading material into Appalachia, into the poorest and most isolated areas in eastern Kentucky that had few schools, no libraries, inaccessible roads. 63% of the people had no access to any kind of books. The Bookwomen, had to provide their own horses or mules, and most of them were leased from local farmers. Some routes were so steep that one bookwoman, Grace Cottle Lucas, had to lead her horse across the cliffs. Other areas had deep water, and her feet sometimes froze to the stirrups. Another librarian chose to hike her 18-mile route on foot after the death of her mule. One librarian had a very old mule and so walked with her animal part of the route instead of riding. The librarians were known as bookwomen, though there were a very small number of men among their ranks. These fearsome Kentucky librarians traveled by horse, mule, and sometimes foot, and even rowboat to reach the remotest areas, in creeks and up crags, into coves, disconnected pockets, and black forests, to towns named Help for Certain, Troublesome, and Cut Sheen, sometimes traveling as much as 100 or more miles a week in rain, sleet, or snow. Now, I wondered when I went to this play, how are they going to do horses? It's pretty much a big part of this. Well, this is how they did horses, which is really pretty clever, I think. They were on rollers. You can't see the rollers in them. And then they had these girls dressed in like cowboys would push them along. It was very cute. The government pays the Packhorse librarian salary of $28 a month. And only that. They didn't get books. The government did not provide the books. So this picture is showing that the books were donated by bigger libraries in bigger towns and richer cities, from women's clubs, PTA, Boy Scout troops, all across Kentucky and Ohio. So every 6 weeks or so, crates of books came in from library centers around Kentucky. Sometimes they would have to go get them and bring them back. Let's see if that's the next picture. Yeah, like this woman. If you think hauling 50 books back from one of those centers, that's probably what it would look like. The book women, oops, sorry, just a minute. Got lost here. We'd exchange books and then send them back, packing the wooden boxes with about 50 books each. And so some of them were hauled by the railroad free of charge. Now, I don't know if any of you have worked in a donation center, but sometimes the donations you get, you just wonder, what were people thinking? Things that don't work, things that are torn, stuff like that. And that applied to the books as well. So the richer libraries would take books that were, came back torn, pages torn out, or the covers did something done to the covers, and that's what they would send to them. So very often they'd get books with the back 3 pages missing for some reason, and covers torn off, and so they had to do what they could to mend them and make them at least readable to the people that they were taking them to. So it wasn't like they were getting brand new books all the time. And they really treasured newspapers and magazines, and as you'll see. So you can see both these houses at the same time. That would be a typical household that they'd be going to. It just kind of a ramshackle shacks, and they'd be built up into the mountains, very isolated. This is a quote, "We'd been depressed as long as I could remember, but now, all of a sudden, the government said we needed help and aimed to do just that. The president had added the Works Progress Administration last year to put females to work and bring literature and art into the King Tut man's life. For many mountain folk, all of us around here, it was our first taste of what a library could give, a taste to be savored, one that left behind a craving for more." And this is a list of one librarian. They had to keep track of what they took and to whom. This one says, "Wednesday the 15th, the Farley children, Crystal, 4 comic books, Mrs. Petunia Grant, The Schoolmaster's House at Yellow Rock, 2 editions, Ladies' Home Journal, February, April 1937, 1 edition, Black Beauty by Anna Sewell, and in parentheses, ink marks. Mr. F. Homer, 1 edition, Folk Medicine by D.C. Jarvis, The Sisters Fritz, 1 edition, Cimarron by Edna Ferber, Magnificent Obsession by Lloyd C. Douglas. Note, 3 back pages missing, cover water damaged." So think of that when you're reading a book and you get to the last 3 pages.
Yeah, and what was the level of literacy of the people?
it seemed to be varied. Some people had learned to read from the Bible, they had been taught by their parents, if their parents knew. A lot of them, the librarian had to read to them, and which would take time on her route. So she had to prepare for that. And so in many cases, she was actually teaching them. The Bible was the most requested item, along with magazines. I love her pipe. She has a spit tune by her feet. We'll see in the next picture. Ah, there it is. Okay, so the librarians came up with ingenious ways to provide more reading resources. So they would take books and magazines that they couldn't mend and tear them apart, and then they make these scrapbooks. And this is actually a picture taken from the Smithsonian site. The scrapbooks are considered an American treasure, and they've tried to preserve as many of them as they can. So like this one has a recipe on it and musical notes for something, and I'm not sure why the diagonal pattern, why that was there, for sure, but, and then they have maybe a story in there, if they could cut out a story at least out of something. And so these were just devoured by the patrons, because there was so much in them. And then people would give their recipes to put in one, and their folk medicine ideas, and would pass that around.
Probably just quilt pattern.
Oh, of course. Oh, it does. Yeah, very good. Yes, a quilt pattern. So they also would color pictures to make kids' books, and they wrote journals, helped them write journals and more, all the while seeking donations for their books. Okay, I hope this one comes up full. Good. This picture is so telling. And if you read Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, you're kind of it's parallel to one of the stories in there. This man, the caption said, had been shot and was recuperating. And there's some very interesting things. First of all, the newsprint on the walls. That's why newspapers were so valued, because they could put them on the wall and help insulate their shacks. And then I noticed he has a novel, so he's obviously able to read. He has a couple books there. And then she's showing him some kind of magazine with a truck on the back. But in Bookwoman, there is a story of a man who was shot while stealing a chicken from his neighbor. And the wife, Angeline is her name, was really good friends with the Packhorse librarian, Cussie, and asked Cussie if she came across the doctor on her route, would she please send him, because his leg was all yucky. And she did. She found the doctor, and he said no, he wouldn't go, because the code of the Kentucky is that if you're poor, you do not steal from someone else who's poor. And for that was the reason he wouldn't go. So I think somebody else on her route did folk medicine and stuff and made a poultice for her to take back. And he eventually died, not from the leg thing, but that's a side story that we'll get to when we're done with this. But this is taken from that book. Yellowed newsprint lined moldy walls with a smattering of Angeline's words dotted across the peeling pages. I also want you to notice how she's dressed, because one thing to think of them out in the winter, or the summer and spring and fall, but then there's the winters in Kentucky. And so they would dress as warm as they could. She doesn't look like she's in the heart of winter yet. Whoops. Okay. But this woman is a little more dressed. Writing all winter, a librarian would wrap up so heavily it was hard to remember what she looked like underneath. 2 vests, a flannel shirt, a thick sweater, and a jacket with maybe a scarf or 2 over the top. That was the daily uniform up in the mountains, perhaps with a pair of man's thick leather gloves over her own, a hat rammed low so she could get it, as low as she could get it, and another scarf pulled high over her nose so that her breath might bounce back and warm her skin a little. Now this man looks like he has newsprint maybe over a door or a window, and then he has actual wallpaper maybe. Kind of looks like gift wrap when you look at it up close, but so he might have been able to afford a little more. And it looks like he has carpet, but it also looked like there were bunny slippers under the bed. Anyway. Oops. 2 women sat in a tiny cabin on the side of a vast mountain as the sky slowly darkened, and inside the lamps sent out slivers of gold light through the gaps in the white oak planks. One read, her voice quiet and precise, and the other sat, her stocking feet tucked up under her on the chair, her head resting against her open palm, lost in her thoughts. Time passed slowly, and neither of them minded, and the children, when they stirred awake, didn't cry, but sat quietly and listened, even though they understood barely any of what was said. An hour later, the 2 women stood at the door and almost on an impulse, hugged each other tightly. Now, whoops, okay. The school one I wanted to talk about a minute. If there was a school, they were very few and far between, and the kids would have to walk to get there. If there happened to be a mule or a horse in their family, the father would probably have to take it to go work in the coal mines. So now this one had a building that would look like, I doubt if it was a school building. It almost looked too good, but like maybe it was a storage building or something that they were using. And so anyway, they were very poorly furnished. They sometimes didn't even have textbooks. So when the Packhorse librarian came, boy, that was like, yeah, like a godsend. Because then they would have books, and the teacher could use them to teach them. The kids could take them home if their parents allowed them. And so that was a heyday to come to the school. In its service, more than 1,000 women served in the Packhorse Library Project, and it was reported that nearly 600,000 residents in 30 eastern Kentucky counties, considered pauper counties, were served by them. During those years, the beloved program left a powerful legacy and enriched countless lives. Incredible women who came to understand that delivering books, reading and singing to folks was about more than just providing a service, helping kids learn to read. It was about feeding people's souls. It was about connecting to folks in ways that allowed them to feel like part of a community, even though they were completely isolated. People struggling through a very hard life could have a means of emotional escape through the stories they read. And wide-eyed children full of hopes and dreams who wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunities could fuel the flames or their imaginations and reach for those dreams by learning to read. And this is my favorite picture from the play, because that's what it was all about, and teaching the kids to read and reading to them. So Now, mostly they were accepted into each of the places they went. But there are always people that are skeptical and didn't want anything to do with the government. The government was behind it, it was awful. So they would just refuse to let their kids even have a book. And there was one incident in one of these books where the father didn't want government stuff in his house, but he wanted his kids to learn to read. So he made a tin contraption and set it down the road a ways by a tree. And then the librarian would come and leave the books in that container, and then the kids would come down and they could read as long as they stayed by that tree, but they could not bring the books into his house. So so they ran into all kinds of things. But you got, those of you that have read any of these books, you have anything I skipped over or left out?
No, I just wanted to say that I have read a couple of those, and the parts that I liked were how the librarians got caught up in the families. They might run across a woman in the middle of childbirth and have to help with that, or an abusive husband and have to help her, console her, if nothing else. And the kids would just run down the road when they saw her coming because they were so happy. The intertwining of their lives was really interesting.
And oftentimes if they had their food along for their meals, their own meal, they would share with kids that had nothing. Yeah, you're right.
And the hardships that they had to endure with their mule, just getting there through the snow and the water and the cold, and no matter what, they always got there. And I don't think any of them died that I ever heard of.
Not in.
Yeah.
Did they sleep?
Yeah, I don't.
Did they stay overnight?
Pardon?
Where did they stay?
They had to try to get back to their home or their main base. And that's the other thing, the center that they had was not a library. It was usually a shed that maybe a farmer wasn't using or something that they could put the books in. But it wasn't like set up that you could come in and check out anything. I wanted to talk about the blues, the blues. The side story running through Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek is the heroine's name is Cussie. And I was trying to, didn't have time to go back. Was it Cussie Mary? She had like two, anyway, Cussie. And Cussie had a condition that her skin would turn blue if she got angry or very emotional. And so she was considered colored and treated, anybody that knew this, that she was treated just like there was an African American woman in one of these books that was very good about men. She couldn't do a route, but she was very good at mending books and doing the scrapbooks. But she'd have to come in at night so nobody would see her because that would, it's just, and so that all comes into play too. And Cussie happens to fall in love with a doctor not the doctor we mentioned earlier, but a different doctor that had moved back into his, I think it was his parents' house. And anyway, they get married, and that's illegal because she's colored. The whole thing is just, I couldn't believe. And when I first read, I didn't read the author's notes first, which I have discovered I should do. And talking about this turning blue, and it's like, what in the world? Why would she put? That's really bizarre. And then I read her notes, and it said that this is a thing in eastern Kentucky, and that it actually came from Europe. That's the term blue bloods. And she had gotten it, I think her mother is where that came from. Okay, so spoiler alert, the man that got shot and his leg was festering, and when she brought the poultice back to Angeline, he knew that Cussie was a blue, so he didn't want her anywhere around him. And she definitely could not put that poultice on his leg, so Angeline did that. But when she pulled the blanket back, Cussie noticed that his feet were blue. And so he had the gene. Well, Angeline was very pregnant at the time, and Cussie had ridden up, I don't know, a few weeks later to check on her, and here was this man hanging from a tree with a baby laying on the ground that was blue. And Angeline had died in childbirth, and then he realized the child was not even, just the fact that, he's the one that had the gene, but never mind. Anyway, so he had just put the baby there and hanged himself. So Cussie takes the baby and as her own, and that's how we get to the bookwoman's daughter. And so they're both fascinating reads.
The Blue People of Kentucky is real, and there are a few I hear left. They think most of the blue blood has died out, but it's a real event.
Yes, and in the book, the doctor that wouldn't go see the guy with the wound comes up with some concoction. He and a friend, and they want to experiment on her. As everything has to be experimented if it's different. So they put this solution, give her this solution, and it takes away the blue. But I've forgotten what the side effect. There were side effects to it, and yeah. So I don't know that whole thing about people being treated. That was pretty major.
Blue skin, when I read them, I thought, oh, this can't be real. She's putting this in the book just
Yes.
to give it a little.
That's what I thought. She made it up.
So I started researching, and it said, as you said, it came from a family from Europe, and it's for real.
Yeah.
I think now they pretty much bred it out, but it's still, and maybe some with medications, but I think it's still there. I haven't checked since I read the two first ones, the JoJo and the other one, but I still haven't read the daughter, so I have to read that one. Yeah, everyone should read them. Fascinating.
Very good.
Was that a little bit more Eleanor Roosevelt's project as opposed to
I'm
FDR?
wondering, it's
Yeah, I think
attributed
it
to
might.
him. But
Yeah.
it sounds more like
I
something
thought
she would
yeah,
do.
it was her.
Yeah, you're right. So.
Thank you, Anne. That's very, very interesting.